Among the 25 missions we flew, the 10th mission we flew on February 16th of 1945. The target was Salzburg, Germany, an oil refinery. There was 10 tenths cloud cover over the target, so the results were unobserved. Flak was quite heavy at Rhine, but it was not close to us as our target was 5 miles ahead of Rhine. Flak was the barrage type. No damage resulted. We dropped our bombs on Novak's tail. They knocked off his left rudder and elevator. He made it back to England and bailed out. He had a narrow escape. We had a diversion to France. We flew all the way back to the base and then were told the ceilings were too low to land. We diverted back to Peronne, France and landed there, but Novak bailed out over England. That article was written up in Yank magazine sometime later and showed pictures that we had taken of his plane with the left rudder and stabilizer torn off and cables trailing, and it was quite an experience. When he got out of the seat, he had asked his co-pilot to get out first and hold the controls while he got out of the seat. Then he got a hold of the controls from behind his seat and let the co-pilot bail out. When he let go, the ship immediately dove forward and pinned him against the ceiling and went into a tight spin, and the wing broke off, at which point he was freed and he did drop out and was able to clamber out of the top escape hatch right near the top turret. And just as he cleared the plane blew up, and the flames and heat from that blast singed the hair on his head and singed off his eyebrows. He got a cut over his eyebrow and thought he was blind, but he made it and was fine.
Wonderful story. So you enlisted when, Larry?
I enlisted in December of 42. I was called up for service in May of 43. Ultimately graduated from pilot training in June of 44. I initially went to basic in Shepherd Field, Wichita Falls, Texas. And from there I went to primary training at Hatbox Field at Muskogee, Oklahoma. And we flew PT-19s, low wing monoplane, two-seater. And then we went to basic at Coffeyville, Kansas, again in a BT-13. And then went to Aldous, Oklahoma for advanced training in a twin-engine AT-9. There weren't many of those around. It was an all-metal ship, had a very narrow fuselage where it attached to the tail, and we were the last class to fly the AT-9, and they disassembled the best one on the line each day to salvage parts to keep the rest of the fleet flying. But that's what we graduated in. And then I went back to Aldous, Oklahoma after graduation to teach instruments for a while. I taught instruments there for several months when they came through with a directive that you had to have graduated from Bryan Instrument School to teach instruments. Of course, I hadn't. So they put me in charge of a colored detachment, and the services were segregated at that time, and the colored people did latrine duty, KP duty, etc. A fellow from Lubbock, Texas, and I were both in charge of those details, and we went into the CO and said, we want out. We didn't join this man's Air Force to fly mops and toilet plungers, so we want out. And he said, well, you know what that means, and we allowed us how we did, but we wanted out, so we were sent next to staging. And ultimately, I went to Charleston, South Carolina for 3 months of training where I met my crew. And we did very little flying out of there. And I was assigned to a B-24 outfit as co-pilot. Had never seen a B-24 until I got to Charleston and saw my first one there. We did 1,000-mile over-water night flight, I remember, out to Bimini Island and to Galveston, Texas, and back to Charleston. We flew a few other formation-type flights, and then I was sent off to staging at Westover Field, Massachusetts, and ultimately selected as a boarding officer on the Queen Mary. We shipped over on the Queen Mary
How many hours do you think you had in the B-24 before you
I
picked up?
had less than 20 hours.
Less than 20 hours.
Right. And when we got to our base, ultimately, we landed in Glasgow, Scotland, and we had to be taken off by tenders. The Queen was too much draft to pull into any dock over there, so it took about 10 days to unload the ship. But we were eventually moved as a crew to by train from Glasgow, Scotland to Wendling, England, and we arrived there at night. We're assigned our barracks, and that was the first recollection of what I was headed for the rest of my Air Force career in the service. But it was a nice kind of a relationship that we had. But the CO at our base at Wendling looked at my flight record and said, "You haven't had much time in the 24, and I said I certainly hadn't. He said, "Well, let's ride with you a few times." So he took me up, and he told me the only thing that would bring me back was to fly tight formation. He said, "The tighter you can fly that ship to your adjoining ship, the better off you're going to be."
So you got a few more hours.
We got a few more hours, but not a whole lot. I still only probably did about 5 missions with the commander of the base, and then we did a couple of practice missions as a crew to break our navigator in. There were fields about every 5 miles in England, so to return to your base was a trick by itself. You could get headings and all, but to pick out your own base from the ones that surrounded you was always a chore. There were certain landmarks and points that we always looked for when we returned. Big cathedral that sat in our landing pattern, and that was our usual target to look for when we were coming back toward our base. At any rate, those words from our CO were so profound and came back to me several times, and I can tell you that the only reason we got back successfully is that we did fly tight formation. First mission we flew over there was a mission that we got broken up in cloud cover. We sent up 10 planes from our squadron, 27 from our bomb group, and we were the only plane to get back to the base that day. The rest of the planes, some of them made it back to other bases, some of them were shot down and never did return. Our barracks was cleaned out that night. The first mission we flew, we were the only crew to get back. There were the officers from 3 other crews there that didn't make it. And the second mission got a little bit tougher. We really didn't know if that's what we were to expect or what. But at any rate, we learned that was not par for the course. But the reason that we made it back and others didn't is when we went into the clouds, I allowed us how the lead plane had to be looking on instruments, and I decided that if he was on instruments, we were going to be on instruments too. And we went through the clouds and went in together, we came out together on the other side. The rest of the ships scattered. And when they came out, they were sitting ducks to fighters that were up there waiting for them. And we made it through, and together we made it out of there. But the others that straggled and came out by themselves were just sitting ducks. The first mission we flew was December 6th of 1944, and we finished our 25th mission on the 20th of April of 1945. There were a number of incidents, some more memorable than the others, but one that I shall never forget was on December 29th of 1944. Our target was Neuwied, Germany, a marshalling yard and supply depot. We actually never reached our target. We were hit by flak about 30 miles short of our target. There were only 4 bursts visible, and at first we thought only one of those bursts struck, but we later found out that 2 actually hit us. And actually the burst occurred right near our transfer pumps, where we transferred the fuel from wing tank to wing tank, leveling our load and transferring from different engines to fuel to the different engines. Immediately we lost our 2 inboard engines. We were unable to get fuel delivered to our 2 inboards because our transfer pumps were knocked out. We lost 1,800 gallons of gas in less than 20 minutes. And the gas flowed out so freely through that area that it dropped down into the bomb bays and then leaked out through the bomb bays and was swept up under the ship to the rear hatch where it went into the waste compartment. Our waste gunners were walking ankle deep in gasoline. My immediate reaction was to get rid of the bombs, but our nose gunner was the one that did the arming, and he reminded me that if we dropped our bombs, we were very apt to set off sparks. Each of the bombs has a spinner on them that spun off as the bombs dropped free, and that was connected first to keep that spinner from coming off in the plane, but also to arrest static electricity within the airplane. And when that wire clip was pulled loose, it set off a spark generally. Any one of those sparks could have blown us sky high. We had a ultra high frequency radio set that had a detonator in it so that if we were to crash on impact, it would blow up that IFF set so it wouldn't fall into enemy hands. That was hit by a piece of shrapnel from the burst, and it exploded, but it was well above where the gas was accumulating, and even the fumes were swept free, so obviously we didn't explode from that. We flew back, we dropped out of formation. The ships around us saw that trailing gasoline that was leaking out, that vaporized as it hit the cold air at altitude, and it looked like smoke to them. And when they got back to the base, they reported us going down in flames. They assumed we were on fire. The truth of the matter is we did drop down. We were losing altitude greatly with running on just 2 engines. We spotted a base, and just after we spotted it, we saw a P-51 on it and assumed that it was a friendly base. And just as we spotted that from a very lowered altitude, the third engine quit, and we came in actually on one outboard engine. We landed on one outboard engine on a field that had been occupied by the Germans the night before. They set bombs off on either side of the runway thinking that they had destroyed the runway's use, and we went down through the bomb craters and debris. As we were leveled out, ready to touch down, the indicator light indicated the gear was down and locked, and our navigator, we normally set gear down and locked when that indicator light came on, and he said, "The hell it is, the left gear is still up." At that point we rocked it in on the right wheel and the gear fell down and locked in place. We rolled out to a complete smooth landing. We got out of the ship as rapidly as we could, just ran from it as rapidly as we could. Next morning we came back, and there was an area about half the size of a city block that was pink with hoarfrost, where the gasoline had continued to pour out of that airplane, and surrounding ground was frozen, and it just simply spread. And we really couldn't imagine how far that gas had traveled. So there was a lot of fuel that was pouring out of that plane even as we landed. So we were extremely lucky. On that particular mission, the field we landed at was at Lyon-Couveron, at Lyon Airfield at Lyon, France. I should mention that our engineer was the only one that suffered any ill effects from that, and it was simply that he tried to shove an A3 bag into the opening as in those transfer pumps where the gas was pouring out. He got frostbite on his hands and arms, and the high octane, 100 octane gasoline burned his eyes and his face just from the fumes. But we slept in a barn that night adjacent to the airfield. Next morning we went back out to our ship, and we were able to notify authorities that we were down. None of our people in England knew about it, of course, but they sent a crew to drop the bombs out of our aircraft then, to disarm them and drop them, and it was quite a sight to see them do that. They pulled out the detonators of the bombs, and then they had a cocoa mat pad, a thick pad, and simply put those under the bomb bays and trigger those bombs and drop them out, roll them out to the side, drop the next one. We had 7 1,000-pounders aboard that day. To see a 1,000-pound dropping down onto that cocoa mat was quite a sight. Not knowing how safe they were, it gave us a bit of a start. They were the ones, that crew in that truck took us then from that field to a place where eventually we got a ride back to our base about 2 days later, back to Wendling, England, in a C-47. While we were riding through the countryside of France in that truck, we decided to look at what we were seated on in the back of that truck, and we opened the covers on one of the boxes, and here were all the detonators of bombs that they had been disarming elsewhere from aircraft, or bombs that had dropped and not detonated, and what have you. Any one of those detonators could have sent us sky high too. It was quite a sensation. When we got back to our base, our CO met us at the base, handed us telegrams that were messages to our parents that we were reported missing in action. We, of course, were elated to be back, and our first thought was to tear them up. I sure regret that now. I wish I'd have saved it as a souvenir, but on the other hand, I'm terribly glad it didn't get to my parents, because I lost a brother in Luzon in the Philippines, and I was the only other sibling of our family, the 2 brothers, and both of us in the service at the same time, and they always worried more about me than they did about my brother in the infantry, thinking that I was in a more dangerous part of the war. Not so, apparently.
Okay. Right now you're looking at an AT-9. That's a twin-engine advanced trainer, the last of its breed. We were the last squadron, last class to fly the AT-9 at Altus, Oklahoma. They disassembled the best one off the line each day to scrounge enough spare parts to keep the balance of the fleet flying, but we managed to complete our training in the AT-9. It was a hot ship, had a extremely steep angle of glide. If you came in for a landing, you really just put the nose down and prayed, I guess. It was a fine airplane, though. I know we wound up selling that to Switzerland as a pursuit plane eventually. That's the Class 44F yearbook from Altus, Oklahoma. Inside are pictures of all the cadets of that class, and some of the fellows I enlisted with. One gentleman in particular that I enlisted with, who lived in St. Paul. We were together. Not only were we together, we bunked together in basic and primary, in basic training, primary, basic, and advanced. Had the same instructors all the way through. I wound up being his best man at his wedding after graduation back here in St. Paul. We separated when he went on to B-24 transition school, and I wound up going back to Altus, Oklahoma to teach instruments. You're looking at my primary instructor, Mr. Clark, one of the finest pilots that I think I ever flew with. A caring individual. One of my classmates would get airsick at about 15 minutes, and rather than wash the man out, he worked with him until he recognized that he could be up for 15 minutes before he became airsick. So he started flying him for 12 minutes, coming in and landing. Gradually built it up. He gave him a sugar-coated placebo pill that he said was going to cure him, and sure enough, in a matter of a week or so, he had him back to flying full-time, and went on and graduated him through primary on to basic to advanced, and he graduated in Class 44F with the rest of us. This is my basic instructor. For the life of me, I cannot remember his name, and that's really regrettable because he was an excellent instructor. He was particularly a perfectionist on instrument flying, and I think he was the one that taught me the significance of instrument flying and how important it would be in the future, and put me in awfully good stead for what happened to me in advance and following advanced flying as well. The picture you're looking at now is a BT-13. In primary, we flew PT-19s, open cockpit. BT-13 had the canopy, fixed landing gear, not retractable, had quite a similarity to the AT-6, but wonderful airplane to fly. Crew number was 424. This is the crew I was assigned to as co-pilot. B. Ray Shaw was our pilot. Navigator Mike Anstey. Bob Burke was a bombardier that shipped overseas with us aboard the Queen Mary, but was taken from us after we got over there because we no longer used bombardiers by the time we got there, except in the lead, deputy lead, and alternate lead ship. All the other bombardiers were sent back to navigation school and retrained to other positions. Our enlisted men are there. I won't go through the list of them, but this crew served together, remains together. The only one that's missing now is our pilot. His widow comes to all our reunions. We've had numerous reunions. We've been back to England together, a number of us. We've been back twice to our base. We were together as recently as 2 years ago in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, and we plan another reunion in this fall in October at the 2nd Air Division's reunion in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Go ahead.
Okay, now we're looking at a picture of Wimpy's Queen. B. Ray Shaw was a short, stocky individual. In fact, it might be interesting for you to know that we used to use wooden blocks on the rudder pedals and the brakes for him to reach the pedals. He was affectionately known as Wimpy. His wife, Narissa, was known as Queenie, so hence the name Wimpy's Queen. Ours was one of the few ships that had two names. The other side of the ship was named by our crew chief, Harold Deddy, who kept company with a gal that ran a YMCA-sponsored tea wagon on the base. Brought tea around to all the hard stands and to the crews before we took off and so forth. So he named the other side of our ship YMCA Flying Service. Now you're looking at a picture again of our crew, including our crew chief and assistant crew chief, Tommy Tompkins on the extreme left of the picture, and Harold Deddy with Peggy, the gal from the tea wagon, plus our crew. And of course, here's the infamous tea wagon that we speak of that caused all this extracurricular naming on the other side of the ship, Peggy's YMCA tea wagon. Here's a picture of our ship as it was dropping its bombs, and you'll note that there's a definite incline to the position. When you drop several thousand pounds of bombs, up to 8,000 pounds at one time, the ship leaps, really jumps up 4 or 5 feet immediately. As a pilot, you had to be cognizant of that and throw the quadrants forward because you'd be in an awfully steep climb if you didn't. So it carried a max load of 8,000 pounds of bombs, and in this particular one, I believe we dropped 8. There might have been 10 bombs on that one, but then they wouldn't have been 1,000-pounders.
Well, how many pounds?
8,000 pounds of bombs.
How many bombs is that? 8 of them?
It could be 8 1,000-pounders. It could be 250-pound incendiaries. It could be various types of bombs. I have a record of each mission and the bomb load that we carried in each mission, and it was fragmentation bombs, it was demolition-type bombs, it was general-purpose bombs. We had some highly explosive, delayed explosive bombs that were used for penetrating bridges or submarine pens and so forth. It depended on what your bomb load was, but the maximum load of bombs that we carried was 8,000 pounds.
Well, you got 2 bomb bays, right?
Mm-hmm.
A front?
Forward and a back. Aft, right, forward and aft.
What'd you carry in?
We would usually carry a little heavier load in the forward bomb bay than we did in the back bomb bay.
Like 4 up front and...
Yes, 6 up
2 in
front
back?
and 2 in back sometimes,
Okay.
right.
That's one how the mathematics went.
Yeah, yeah. In this one, you can see the definite separation of the forward and aft bomb bay. You'll see we've got additional bombs in the forward bomb bay.
I'm glad I asked that.
Yeah, yeah. We're looking at buildings in King's Lynn, England, which is halfway between our base at Wendling, England, was halfway between the town of King's Lynn and Norwich, the two largest towns nearby. This is where we were able to get to at night by truck for a night away from the base occasionally. We visited here again on our reunions. They have a market square. They did have even during the service. They still have it today. The buildings are exactly as they were in 44 and 45. And it's fun to go back and visit places that you can definitely recall and remember. King's Lynn and Norwich lie very close to what is known as the Wash. It's about 150 miles north of London. This is a scene a little bit closer up of the market square that was held even during the war, where farmers brought produce to the area and people would buy what they could. During the war, these areas, as all of England, was on ration, and there was very little except produce that they were able to buy without ration stamps, so the markets continued. I mentioned Norwich, England, and I should tell you that Norwich is the home of the 8th Air Force Library. We have a Fulbright scholar that mans that library, and it's being paid for by contributions from 8th Air Force members. It's a complete library with lots and lots of interesting things for veterans to go back and see. But I think the significant thing that I can recall of it is the interest with which the young British people have taken in the 8th Air Force. They've gone out to crash sites and excavated and found memorabilia of planes that crashed around bases. They're there for all hours. Almost any time a U.S. airman comes back to that area, there's one of these young people that will take them on tours, show them the memorabilia that they've collected, and take them around and show them their old air bases and so forth. They just, I can't tell you how much they appreciate what we did for Britain. Their people were off in Africa and other theaters of operation, and they claim we came and fought their war for them. After VE Day, for approximately a month, we took our ground personnel on flights over the German cities to show them the damage that had been done by aerial bombing. We flew low-level missions. Our only admonition was that we were to fly low enough for our ground personnel to see the damage. And of course, that was an invitation to buzz with a B-24 like a fighter pilot might do. And frankly, we lost more personnel in that month of flying after the war than we did in the last month of the war. People did some crazy, stupid things, flying way down on the deck, flying up the valley of the Rhine River, and only then when you're banking in a turn do you realize how much a B-24 mushes in a turn. It's impossible to rack it up enough to follow the curves of those riverbanks, and they piled him in one after the other, pulled up too late and hit bridges and etc. But in a picture like you're looking at now, from the air, the streets literally glistened with glass that had been broken. There are no roofs, no glass left in any of the buildings. They were demolished. In this photo, we're approaching Cologne, Germany, up the river to Cologne, and if you'll note, you can see the bridges that are out. We'll get a closer shot of Cologne here in a bit. The cathedral, of course, in Cologne, which stood all of that damage with minimal damage. Many people say it was on purpose. I would have to believe more by accident than on purpose, but the Cologne Cathedral did escape major damage. Buildings surrounding it were devastated and just about ruined. This is a closer shot of Cologne. Again, now the cathedral stands in greater prominence to the surroundings, and you can see a little closer up the devastation of the buildings surrounding it. Again, the bridges that cross the river, of course, are completely destroyed. You're looking at a couple of pieces of flak alongside of our aircraft. That particular plane that you're seeing in that photograph was hit by flak at one point that we talked about, where we came back with 144 holes. Some of the holes were made by those two pieces of flak that you see there. They're machined. You can see the tooling on the edges of the piece of flak. They're jagged, of course. Some were much larger than that. I salvaged 3 or 4 pieces, and by now I guess I'm down to 2.
Was that the flak that,
That was the one that knocked our transfer pumps out, and
okay, you didn't mention that just now, did you?
I said when we came back with 144 holes in our ship, this was some of the flak that caused those holes. But I didn't mention the transfer pumps particularly, but I can do that. Well, I don't know. I think the relation is there because I mentioned earlier there was 144 holes in the ship.
Okay.
Yeah. There are several things in this picture that I'd like to point out to you. First of all, this is taken over Magdeburg on one of the bomb runs. It's our squadron. The protrusion beneath the ship is a radar dome. We affectionately knew it as a Mickey. Mickey operator went with us on our missions in place of the bombardier, and this allowed us to bomb through 10/10 cloud cover. They could pick up our targets on radar so that we, at the tail end of the war at least, had no excuse for not flying over our target. In that picture also you'll notice smoke streams falling beneath the plane. That was from the lead ship who dropped smoke bombs, and they left a trailing effect visible across that area, pointing to the target. That was what the rest of the ships dropped their bombs on. When they saw those, when we got into that spot in the formation and saw that trailing, then we could release our bombs from the lead ship using their navigational equipment dropped that way. There's one other piece. There's only armament on the airplane was adjacent to the pilot and co-pilot on the opposite sides of that cockpit area. And it was a piece of 3/8 inch armor plating adjacent to the sides of the cockpit area. The only piece of armament on any place on the B-24. You're looking at a strike photo of Magdeburg taken from 22,500 feet. You can still see streams of smoke bombs going down toward the target. You can also see some impact on it. It's not a clear shot, but you got to remember we were dropping through cloud cover, and this is what we were able to do with the Mickey operator. We were dropping through anywhere from 4/10 to 10/10 cloud cover and still hitting our target. Here we're looking at a strike photo at Landshut, Germany, taken from 18,000 feet. Our target is right at the tip of that pin that's laying on top of the photo. You can see the incoming bombs, again, the smoke bombs, the lead bombs. There's bombs visible in there that are in the process of falling. That target had been hit by previous groups that flew over that day, but again, the target was pretty obliterated before the end of the day. We're going to repeat that last picture again so that we can point out to you that you can actually see the bombs at the ends of those streams of smoke. We'll follow it with a pen down to where you can see the actual bomb. Right below that pen now is a bomb in that outer stream of smoke. Right in there now you'll see farther over, right there, you'll see a bomb. Actually, at the end of that trail of smoke is a bomb that's visible in that picture. Several of these, you can see the actual bomb at the end of those streams of smoke as they're descending to the target. This is an aerial strike photo of Liepheim, Germany, taken from 22,000 feet. An airstrip. There are bombs right around the center of that airstrip, a cluster of bombs that are exploding in this particular picture, and you'll see the smoke streams coming from the bombs out of the squadron right to that airfield. I can guarantee you no airplanes took off or landed that day at Liepheim, Germany. I'd like to just spend a little bit of time talking about what I considered the flying characteristics of the B-24. To me, it was a very stable plane, a very well-built plane. It carried a heavier bomb load than the B-17, had a wider range than the B-17, and flew faster than the B-17. It was the brunt of a lot of jokes, a lot of comments about people saying that was the box that the B-17 was shipped overseas in. Someone called it the Widowmaker. Other called it the flying boxcar, and all kinds of jokes about it. But it was a marvelous aircraft. A little bit heavy to control and manage, but you knew exactly what the plane would do, and it responded well to the controls. It was the first airplane to come out with the flexible wing, the Davis wing. Very efficient wing. Had a lot less wing surface than the B-17. It had a wider wing span than the B-17, but yet less surface by quite a number of square feet. But it was a flexible wing. It went up 12 inches from the position it sat on the ground. It went down 6 inches from that position. It flopped on the end 18 inches. It wasn't uncommon to see an engine going up or the other engine going down at the same time on it. It was a little disconcerting to begin with, but it was a very stable airplane. The flight characteristics were, it was a hot ship. It took off at relatively high speeds. You didn't begin to haul the nose wheel off of that aircraft until you were doing at least 110 miles an hour, preferably 120. It lifted off somewhere between 120 and 130. Landing characteristics were very much the same. Had a rather high stall speed, and you landed at above 110 miles an hour. Touchdown was at around 110 miles an hour. Anything below that, and you'd be in a stall mode. So it was considered to be a rather hot airplane, but it flew very nicely. There were a tremendous number of those planes built. 18,479 B-24s built during World War II, more than any other aircraft in World War II. And it was built in 5 plants. It originally was built in San Diego at the Consolidated Aircraft Company. It was then also built at Fort Worth, Texas, and Willow Run. Ford Motor Company built a number of them in Willow Run.